Welcome to Friday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live here on Giants.com as well as the mobile app. He's Paul Dottino. I'm Lance Medow with you for the next 60 minutes. And it is presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Multiple ways you'd interact with us here on the program. You give us a ring, 201-939-4513. That is option A. Option B, you can stay behind the computer screen. Hashtag Giants Chat on Twitter. And as a reminder, you can find the archive of this show and our entire podcast network on the Giants mobile app, podcast platforms everywhere, and at Giants.com/podcast. So the Giants gearing up to travel to South Florida, go head-to-head with the Miami Dolphins in Week 5. Brian Daboll spoke to the media earlier today, so let's start there. Obviously, the big storyline, Paul, is the health and well-being and the status of the offensive line. And we have gone through 2 days of practice. Today is the third, where Andrew Thomas, Shane Lemieux, and John Michael Schmitz did not practice. And Brian Daboll indicated he does not anticipate they will get any work in. He did not rule them out, but you put 2 and 2 together, Paul. When 3 guys don't practice for a full week, I would say the chances of any of them getting out there, and that's just my personal opinion, are probably extremely slim.
I would agree with you. He said Saquon Barkley will be limited again today, but they will see how he feels. Obviously, there'll be a walkthrough tomorrow before the team boards its charter down to Miami. Usually, in years past, they have a real good idea on Friday, but sometimes they will actually wait for the walkthrough before they officially decide that somebody is going to be out. I get the impression they'd like to wait that long for Barkley, but I think his situation is still a bit cloudy.
Well, and we talked about this, Paul, in terms of his previous injury history. We're only at the point where he's missed 2 games, right? San Francisco, and then he missed the last game as well against Seattle. In years past, he was out 3 to 4 games minimum. So you do the math. I mean, he still is on track to return at a reasonable time, but if he misses this Sunday, would it be stunning? Is there a better chance that he plays against Buffalo? Perhaps. I mean, the bottom line is the Giants need to score, okay? And that's stating the obvious. Whether Barkley's on the field or not is irrelevant. They need to manufacture points. They're going up against, Paul, the number 1 offense. You don't even have to have an opinion. Statistically speaking, it's a fact. The Dolphins are number 1 in the NFL in points per game, total yards, passing yards, and rushing yards.
All skewed by the Broncos game.
Okay, well, you could say that all you want, but it's not
true.
as if they haven't looked too bad outside of the Broncos game. I know they lost to the Bills, but you know what? They scored 3 touchdowns even in that game.
2 games in the 20s, and that's what you have to focus on. If you're the Giants, you want to focus on the 2 games where they scored in the 20s, to Buffalo and to New England.
24 and 20.
Okay? Yeah. And what you see in those games is that you forced that Miami defense to slow down because you hit them. You made them feel the pain. It goes back to what Belichick did to the Bills in Super Bowl 25. When you got a fast team that wants to run around like a bunch of pinballs inside a game, you need to whack them. You need to make them feel it, and you make them second-guess themselves the next time they try to jitterbug through your defense. So the Giants need to be overly physical, like both of those teams were. And then, on top of that, you must absolutely punish Tua. Make sure that you hit him as often as you possibly can, because his numbers are dramatically different when he gets hit. Much like, and again, folks, be careful here, I'm not comparing him to Tom Brady. I'm not doing that. But there have been quarterbacks in this league over the years that you see a dramatic drop-off in their performance when they're getting whacked. There are other quarterbacks who, even if they're under a lot of heat, they're able to maintain a high standard of play. Tua is not one of them. So you must whack him as often as possible.
It's interesting you brought up those 2 games because I would argue I don't think the Patriots were that effective in flustering him as much as what Buffalo did.
Buffalo was
really good. Correct.
With him.
Yes, but
with the rest of the team, the Pats were pretty nasty.
They were good, but they only had a sack and 2 quarterback hits. You look at Buffalo.
I'm not talking about what they did to Tua. I'm talking about the rest of the team.
Okay, but I'm focusing on...
They turned that game into a wrestling match, and that's what really helped the Patriots.
And I think part of that also is Belichick and their scheme.
No doubt.
And also having familiarity with the Dolphins, having been in the division too. I wouldn't overlook that. But what impressed me about Buffalo was Buffalo won the battle in the trenches. And Buffalo was continuously getting at Tua because the first 3 games, Paul, you look at the sacks and the quarterback hits. So you have 2 statistics here to monitor. You're talking about Tua was sacked once and 5 quarterback hits, the 3 opponents recorded. Then the Bills came out, they sacked him 4 times, and they got 9 quarterback hits. And the 9 is maybe even more critical to highlight than the 4, because you were continuously in his vicinity. You were making him think about what you could do. Now, you apply it to the Giants. Paul, we're talking about a team that has 4 sacks in 4 games, and they had none in the first 2. So the question is, can the Giants, can they find the middle ground, Paul, between New England and Buffalo's performance against the Dolphins? If you could do that, can you get a sack or 2 and 5 quarterback hits? How about that? Is that a reasonable number? I don't think that's a stretch.
No, I think you want more.
No, I know, but I'm trying to be reasonable here.
No.
In terms of my estimation.
No. Look.
Yeah.
You're 1-3. Shoot high.
Well, without a doubt, you shoot high.
Shoot high. But don't settle. Shoot high.
But I'm just looking at it from what is reasonable to perhaps expect, especially if Connor Williams comes back and reassumes the center position. He was out the last game, and they had Liam Eichenberg in there, and you could tell there was a difference. So Connor's been a limited participant in practice. He comes back. That absolutely helps the Dolphins' offensive line.
Okay, we know that Teron Armstead is out.
Yes,
the left tackle.
Correct.
All right, that's a big deal, because that guy, when it's on the field, once again, one of those often injured players.
Yeah, Kendall Lamb, his replacement's a solid vet. He's been in the league, but
he's not Armstead.
Certainly not Teron Armstead.
Right,
no, but it's not like the rookie they're bringing in.
You want Thibodeau to do what he did last week against Seattle. He played well last week. He had his most impactful game. You need him to take it up another notch, knowing that Armstead's not in the lineup. You want to talk about who's got to make those hits? Eichenberg had trouble with the snaps. Okay? So Dexter Lawrence, you got to be salivating at the bit.
Yeah.
You got to make that guy as nervous as possible so that he's thrown off of his game. If you're Thibodeau, you got to make sure you take advantage of that left tackle spot as much as you possibly can. I think those are the 2 guys, more than anybody else on the field, Thibodeau and Lawrence from the Giants' defensive front, who have to be able to get to Tua. If you really want me to narrow it down, those are the 2 guys. Those are the 2 matchups I think the Giants can win on the defensive front.
Assuming, of course, Connor Williams doesn't play, based on that information.
And even if Connor Williams does play, I think Dexter Lawrence can handle him.
Oh, he absolutely can, but I do think there's a distinct difference between Connor Williams and Eichenberg.
Yes.
In terms of performance.
I wouldn't dispute that.
There's a bigger advantage, I guess is what I'm getting at, Paul, if Eichenberg plays at center.
Sure.
Where Dex could really set the tone and collapse that pocket, and then the edge guys can perhaps have somewhat of an advantage. Because the way you get extra physical with the Dolphins, which is what you let off with, and you fluster them and you slow down their scheme, is you've got to win up front. Because if you're going to have a track meet with the Dolphins, it's not going to work out in your favor. And here's the other thing. You talked about being physical with also their skill position players, but that, to me, has to go hand in hand with wrapping guys up and not missing tackles. Because if you look at the Miami-Buffalo game, the Dolphins had problems with Stephon Diggs, okay? Forget Miami. In terms of their offensive position. On defense, there was a play where Diggs was throwing the ball up the left sideline. You had 2 guys in the vicinity, and Diggs wiggled his way out of traffic and then took it to the house for a touchdown. You do that to Tyreek Hill, Paul. You do that to Jalen Waddle, and I could sit here and name 1,000 other guys. It's going to be a very long afternoon. It's going to be equivalent to what Noah Fant did when you had Seahawks-Giants. So I'm all for being physical with them, but if physicality gets in the way of fundamentals and tackling, that's where you're all of a sudden entering a gray area.
As Wink Martindale said yesterday, there are always going to be missed tackles in a game. I mean, the odds of any defense coming out of an NFL football game with 0 missed tackles,
you're not going to be perfect.
It's 5 million to 1.
Sure.
Okay? Because as he says, the offensive players get paid too.
Yep.
So that's not going to happen. The problem is, how many do you have, missed tackles that is, and how fatal do they turn out to be?
Yeah.
Now, they had 2 missed tackles on the Fant long pass down the sideline. Well, guess what? That's the only touchdown drive Seattle was able to execute the other night. So you'd have to say those 2 missed tackles, only 2, proved to be fatal. It's that simple. You can't have fatal missed tackles against the Dolphins. If you're going to have a few missed tackles, they're going to happen because they're so slippery.
Well, it could be 3 explosive touchdowns, yeah.
That's it. That's exactly right. You could have 6 missed tackles in the game, but if they don't cost you a huge amount of real estate, you can survive them.
Yep.
You could have 3 missed tackles, and each one could cost you a touchdown. That's the equation that you have to balance.
Timing is everything. I say the same thing, Paul, about turnovers and takeaways, right? They're great. On the takeaway side, it's what you do with them. And then on the turnover side, sometimes it's when they happen. Or if, God forbid, they lead to touchdowns, which obviously has plagued the Giants. Because you can have a turnover and do some damage control, but if it comes at a point in a game where all of a sudden you give excellent field position to the opponent and you're already down by a touchdown, it can be a back-breaking type of play. And the Dolphins, they produce these back-breaking type of plays on offense if you do not bring these guys down. I mean, how many times have we seen Tyreek Hill? He just runs past the defender and Tua throws him a home run. Or you think you're in front of Tua and you think you're in front of Tyreek Hill. They connect on a short pass and then he makes one missed tackle, and then all of a sudden, it's a 75-yard touchdown. Mm-hmm. That's what makes the Dolphins so challenging. And by the way, it's not just their receivers. The 2 running backs right now are playing at the highest possible level in Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane.
That 1-2 punch right now is off the charts. And the funny part about it is, I watched the Buffalo game, and then I watched the Denver game. I've seen both. I've seen the Dolphins twice in terms of their video. Against Denver, man, they had holes that you could run through.
Yep.
They were just gashing the Broncos defense. And look, folks, you thought the Giants' 40-0 loss to Dallas was bad. You should watch that Broncos tape. I mean, Sean Payton must have been puking all over himself for days after watching his defense basically stand around and do nothing to give up 70 points, 10 touchdown drives. Do you know how bad you have to be to give up 10 touchdown drives in a given afternoon? I mean, think about that. Wow. So, I get what the Dolphins did, but when they had absolutely no resistance on the other side of the field, I temper that a little bit.
No, and that's a fair point. That's why I read the numbers of the 3 opponents outside of Buffalo. It's night and day in terms of the physicality for the Bills. The other thing about those Dolphins running backs is Mostert has contributed as a receiver, where Tua, he will not shy away from throwing him the ball even down the field. There was a play, for example, against the Buffalo Bills this past weekend. Mostert was running up the right sideline. He was double-teamed, Paul. Tua threw it to him, and he went up and made a play for his quarterback, just as good as a Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle play. So my point is, half the battle is stopping these guys on the ground because Tua will dump it off to these guys in the flat or even down the field.
No doubt.
And they can make explosive plays that way.
Let me ask you a question. You just mentioned somebody making a nice catch. Through 4 weeks, and I've been calling for this, and I guess complaining is a good word if you like, for years. How many times do you see the Giants, their receivers, their tight end, if you want to include it in there, make a play above the X's and the O's? It seems like every week you watch the NFL highlights, and the league is littered with guys making great catches. They're catching 50-50 balls left and right. They're wrestling them away. They're catching their own tip passes. Sure. They're making diving catches. They're getting their toes down just inside the sideline or the end zone like Amani Toomer used to do all the time. Burris was great at it. Nix was great at it. Toomer was awesome at it. Cruz was good at it. The Giants, so far through 4 games, I haven't seen them making any above the X's and the O's catches yet. And we've been touting this receiving core and this tight end, Darren Waller, for how many months? Guys, it's time to start making catches above the X's and the O's. Make some spectacular big play grabs that are going to help jumpstart this offense, that will shoot 50,000 volts into this offense and get them off the skids.
Well, this is the game to do it of all contests, especially if you're not expecting that your defense is going to play a perfect game. And I say that not because of low expectations. That's realistic speaking, where the Giants defense, to expect them to go out and pitch a shutout every single game is insane. So they're going to give up points, which means the offense is going to have to do something to create some explosive plays. I know the idea that's thrown out a lot, Paul, and you and I have had conversations pertaining to this in past seasons is, well, play keep away in a game like this, right? Keep the Dolphins offense on the sideline, milk the clock. I'm never a big fan of that philosophy in general. I don't think, because here's the thing, you have to still be perfect, Paul. If you're going to go through 10-play, 80-yard drives, 11-play, 90-yard drives, do you know how much extra pressure that's putting on your offense? You can't get penalties. You can't turn over the ball. You have to be ideal with your decision-making. There's no room or margin for error. If you have some drives where you get what you're calling for, you get the 50-yard bomb. You get a running play where he zigzags in and out of traffic and he picks up 25 yards. You're alleviating the pressure on your offense. So to me, this is a game, you need the explosion, much more so than, well, just rest the defense and hope that Tua and company are just going to be spectators. I don't think that's going to benefit them in the long run. And I don't think it's sustainable, too.
Dragging the game down to a crawl and keeping the ball away from the other team's explosive offense is the standard call, and I favor it in most cases. But as is always the situation in the National Football League, it's all about matchups that particular week. Who do you have available? Who's on the injured list? And what's the best strategy to give you the best chance to win? Find the Bill Parcells path to victory. This particular week, as I've said the last 2 weeks, believe it or not, this has got to be an all-time record for me. 3 weeks in a row, I'm saying you got to open it up. You got to use the pass to set up the run. And you got to make some explosive plays in the first quarter to get a lead. I felt that way against San Francisco. I felt that way against Seattle. And I feel that way against Miami. That's against my usual grain. But you have to be flexible. You have to deal with the cards you have on the table today. And given that, I feel as though you've got to go in reverse compared to the usual strategy. So whether or not we agree all the time on this, we certainly agree today. The Giants need to get that offense humming. And if it means making spectacular catches, if it means taking more shots downfield early in the game, even if you're going to put your quarterback at risk, you've got to do it. Because here's what's going to happen, Lance, if you don't. If you try to slow this game down to the conventional way of thinking, the Giants don't have the type of sustained running game that's going to last throughout 4 quarters of this game, which means in all likelihood at some point, the Dolphins will break through and get a lead. Well, then where are you? You're going to be exactly where you've been the last 2 weeks, with the other team holding the advantage, now being able to cheat against your passing game when they know you have to pass, and the Giants will be climbing uphill all over again in the same spot they've been the last 2 weeks against a quality team, not a great defense, but a quality team who, even if you answer, they're going to answer back. You see, what people forget about the comeback against the Cardinals is that not only are the Cardinals a very roster-challenged team, but when the Giants made that comeback against Arizona, Arizona was unable to then counterpunch with their offense. They just didn't have enough to sustain for 4 quarters. They're not very good.
The Giants also had explosive plays to help rally that comeback, right?
But what I'm saying is, if you're down and you're lucky enough to get explosive plays against the Dolphins, their offense is going to answer you.
Yeah, well, because they could do the same exact thing. Well, I was going to bring up the Bills-Dolphins game to help lay out your point. Look at how this game started last Sunday. Touchdown, 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 touchdown. Both teams combined to score on their first 5 drives of that contest. And that, I think,
bobbing and weaving.
Correct.
Jabbing.
Exactly.
Right?
No, Buffalo.
Body shot.
Yeah, 100%. They went at it. And that, I think, helped the Bills get into the flow of the game because they said, okay, hey, we can hang with Miami if it's that type of a game. And then, as you know, things slowed down because there's no way they're going to be able to sustain that. And then Buffalo, as the game slowed down, was able to get some defensive plays, some hits. And they got a fumble, for example. And they turned that into a field goal. And things all of a sudden started padding and adding up. That they walked into the locker room up 31-14. But I'm not comparing the Giants to the Bills. All I'm saying is Buffalo, a big reason why they were able to topple the Dolphins for the first time this season was when you go out and you score 3 touchdowns on as many drives to begin the game, you know, that goes a long way in helping, A, prove that you can hang with the opponent, and B, that you can dictate the tone, and they could dictate the tone, and you're not going to fall off a cliff. The Giants have had a hard time doing that.
You have to dictate the tone, the tempo, the context of the game, the game flow, if you will. I gave this stat yesterday. I don't know how many people were aware of it, but I'll give it again because Lance wasn't here. The Giants have allowed 23 sacks this season. None on fourth down, only 4 on third down. That's it. Only 4 on third down. That's scary. Okay?
Well, the early downs are killing them.
Okay, but why is that happening? Because they're getting behind. They're being forced to then be basically all pass all the time.
Yeah.
And as a result, on all the earlier downs, after they're getting behind by second quarter, third quarter, they're facing relentless pressure, and their patchwork offensive line cannot hold up. All the more reason that you have to attack with the pass early in the game while you are still either tied or in the lead on first or second down. Because that's the only chance you have based on the game flow of how the Giants season has gone, where the defense may be a little bit on their heels as opposed to on the balls of their feet, salivating, dripping blood from their fangs, eager to get to your quarterback.
And we know this from past seasons. And I was listening to some of the Dolphins players speak this week. They talked about, well, can you bank on getting 11 sacks like Seattle? And they said no, but we are watching the moves that the Seahawks players put on all of the Giants' offensive linemen and what they struggle with, what worked, what didn't. So I guarantee you, Bradley Chubb, and if Jalen Phillips plays, they're going to try to dig into
you better hope Phillips
bag
doesn't.
Of archives.
He's been scratched because he's been hurt. You better hope Phillips stays out of the lineup this week.
Yeah, well, he's been getting in some limited practices.
I know.
And he did speak with the media this week. That's not a guarantee that he's going to play.
I know.
But the
you
fact
better hope
that they
he
held
doesn't.
him out. Yeah, well, the point I'm bringing up also is I would argue on paper, Miami has better pass rushers than Seattle does in terms of resume.
Sure
what
they
Chubb
do.
and Phillips bring to the
Sure
table
they do.
compared to the
Chubb
Seahawks.
has never been the same since his rookie season, though.
Well, and he's also had multiple injuries,
No
too,
question.
specifically with his knee
No
issue.
question.
But remember, he's played in Vic Fangio's scheme. If anyone on that defensive side of the ball knows what Fangio wants, it's Bradley Chubb, because they were together in Denver. And you could tell the Dolphins' defense far from a juggernaut. They have had their fair share of ups and downs. You could tell this unit is still feeling out what Fangio wants. You can see the Dolphins can be scored on, but we've sat here in years past and we've talked about attractive matchups for the Giants, Paul, and how on paper it looks glowing, and then you get to game day and you don't handle your business in the trenches, and it really doesn't matter at the end of the day. So I'm not saying that anything is overwhelmingly attractive from the Giants' standpoint until they go out and prove that they can capitalize and take advantage of maybe a defense that doesn't have everything in order. All I'm saying is Phillips and Chubb, they'll wreak havoc if we see a repeat of what went on in that Seattle game, especially in the early downs that you pointed out, and then you play right into the hands of a Dolphins defense where Fangio and company, they'll pin their ears back, and it doesn't matter how good or bad this Dolphins defense has been, the flow of the game will be playing right into their hands.
Totally agree. Look, these are NFL teams, NFL players. Again, the Cardinals are seriously challenged roster-wise, but most teams, if they've got any level of quality on the roster, they will take advantage of the context of the game. And if you slant the context of the game against your own team and let everything tilt in the other guy's direction, most of their opponents or your opponents will take advantage of that. And you won't be able to skate uphill. It's not happening. Now, keep in mind, it will be, if Thomas does not go and it doesn't look promising, it'll be Azudu at left tackle against Bradley Chubb. If you're the Dolphins,
that's what I'm talking about.
That's the matchup that you want to exploit, because Chubb is going to play where Nwosu played last week, and Nwosu gave Azudu fits.
Yeah. And he had a breakout campaign last season, and Nwosu came over from the Chargers, but not a household name. See, That's what I'm saying. You can't get caught up in just names, because there's guys that scheme accordingly, and if the flow of the game once again plays into the hands of the Giants trailing, the Dolphins playing ahead up 2-3 scores, then I guarantee you Vic Fangio is going to give the green light to all of his pass rushers and say, guys, we know they have to throw. We know they don't have the luxury to run. Good luck. So you don't want to put yourself in that position, because you're laying out a gift for a Dolphins defense that is looking for that game, right? Similar, right? Seattle was looking for that game, weren't they? They had gone through 2 offensive clinics against the Lions in overtime, and the Panthers. The first half was not great. The second half was better. So Seattle got that game where they played a complete defensive performance. Miami is searching for that same game, Paul.
They are.
Okay? They want, I don't like to call it a get-right game because matchups, they vary week to week. You know, you could get right one week and then look awful the next week. So it's not a get-right game. It's just you're looking for that complete game. That's the way that I would word it. So Miami is following Seattle's lead. They want that. They yearn for that. It's the Giants' job to prevent that from happening. Let's get to a few reminders before we open up the phone lines. The Giants Huddle podcast, you can check that out on your favorite podcast platform. You can also head to giants.com/podcast. Single tickets, you can still acquire them as the official schedule is out. It's been out for quite some time. They're on sale now. Don't miss the Giants at MetLife Stadium this season. Visit giants.com/tickets to secure your seat. As far as events coming up, well, we're knocking on the door for the Giants 5K run. You can run or walk with Giants legends. Giants Foundation is going to host a 5K race and kids run. It's presented by Quest. It's coming up this Sunday, October 8th, 9 a.m. Eastern, MetLife Stadium. Net proceeds will benefit the Giants Foundation. All participants will receive a commemorative T-shirt. After the race, stay for a post-race festival with appearances by Giants legends and a live DJ. Register now at giants.com/5K. And who knows, Paul Dottino may actually sign that commemorative T-shirt if you catch him at the right moment coming up this season. And last but not least, the Giants official connected TV streaming app, Giants TV. It brings you original video content and game highlights on demand and direct to Big Blue fans. Giants TV, it's free. It's on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, as well as the Giants mobile app. All right, well, let's open up the phone lines as we move forward here on Friday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live, getting you set for the Giants and the Dolphins, 1 p.m. Eastern kickoff on Sunday in South Florida. Tim is in Charleston, joins us here on BBKL. What's happening, Tim?
Hey, Lance and Paul, good to talk to you guys again. So I want to talk a little bit about my expectations for this game and then just comment on Saquon. You know, I don't have very high expectations for this game, but what I would like to see, that would be, if you want to call it a moral victory, so to speak, would be the defense continuing to show improvement. This is a juggernaut offense that's difficult to do that against, but I figure if they can keep them to 3 touchdowns, or the last 3 touchdowns would be like the median, and if they get less than that, that's a superior performance. I think that I'd like to see the offensive line show, I know we're so depleted, but show a modicum of competency and at least give Daniel Jones a chance to do something with his arm or his legs. And the only way I think we pull this game out is if the defense really plays above the X's and O's and creates multiple turnovers. That could flip the game, or a special teams, flip. But I think those are the only real hopes we have. On Saquon, honestly, I think it would be a mistake to Saquon as much as I want him back in the lineup because, like you've said many times, Lance, his performance coming off these injuries is usually subpar. And why risk everything you have for the rest of the season on what is a very, very uphill struggle at this time? And with that, I'll take your comments off the air. Thank you so much, guys. Have a great weekend.
Yep. You too. Appreciate the phone call. As far as the takeaways, I wholeheartedly agree with him. I think this is the type of game, Paul, where, as I like to call it, at bats. You've got to limit Dolphins at bats. How do you do that? You take away the football, and Buffalo did that. Now, Miami has been middle of the pack this season. Their turnover differential's even. They have 5 takeaways and they have 5 turnovers. 5 turnovers in 4 games is not something that you're fearing. I think if you're Mike McDaniel, you want to clean that up, certainly, and you like your turnover differential to go into the plus. But, could the Giants get 2 to 3 takeaways? And remember, they got none in 4 games. And a big reason why they have none is because, Paul, I want to go back to a statement you made, which I think was on point, about on offense, have we seen the above X's and O's plays, those game-changing offensive plays? Well, what about on defense? Have we seen the game-changing defensive plays, Paul? Would I throw out in addition to that? Because you've had 4 sacks, but I don't think any of the sacks have come at a time in the game where it will shift the balance. And you could argue there were some interceptions that were dropped against the Niners. Okay, I'll give you. They've had some plays.
And Thibodeau against Seattle.
But nothing has ever come to fruition here.
The only time they made any serious defensive stops that were amounting to anything was in the fourth quarter against the Cardinals. They shut down Dobbs and company in the fourth quarter as the offense was coming back. They had a couple of 3-and-outs there, and they really.
But that was
really
because of
did the
tackling
job.
and stops, I would say, right? Not necessarily an opportunistic play, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Yeah. So look, again, yes, Giants defense can't just play well Sunday. They have to play great, which includes getting 1 or 2 takeaways. The offense is going to have to bust out. This is why the Giants are such heavy underdogs. They deserve to be heavy underdogs. But there is a Bill Parcells path to victory. That's all we're saying. And we're trying to spell it out for you so you know what to look for if you want to believe the Giants have a chance. Because this is what they're going to have to do. Now, Tua has thrown an interception in 3 of his first 4 games. When he and Xavier McKinney were teammates at Alabama for 3 years, McKinney picked him off only once during their practice sessions. But I know this. He's looking forward to trying to pick him off this Sunday. I mean, he didn't get him in 2021 when they played the Dolphins. But he's looking for one this week because the Giants don't have any.
Speaking of path to victory, which is related to what we're talking about, the Dolphins, they had 2 legitimate turnovers in the game. They had a fumble and an interception. And by the way, Buffalo capitalized and scored 10 points off of those 2 takeaways. That was critical. But if you look at after they had this offensive clinic, okay, so I want to pick things up. When the Dolphins had their first fumble of the game, it was 28-14 at that point. The field goal made it 31-14. And then you look at the second half possessions. After a touchdown to make it 31-20, interception, turnover on downs, turnover on downs, turnover on downs. What I'm talking about is look at how many at-bats you limited Miami, right, in terms of getting into scoring position. You took away the ball, 2 plays pick, and then each of their last 3 possessions. Now, part of this was you put them in the position. They were playing from behind, so you knew they had to go for it. But it was a turnover on downs on the last 3. That's what it took. I don't want to take anything away from the Bills, but the Bills' defense on the last 4 possessions of the game gave Miami nothing.
They answered the bell.
Yeah.
Look, here I'm going to tell you this. If the Giants can somehow get their offense going and light a fire to that piece of wood and get it going, make some explosive plays early, get a lead, I would actually advocate at some point during the second half of trying to slow the game down with the run and with the short pass. You don't have to necessarily continue taking risks and gambles if you're up by 10, let's say. You're up by 7 or you're up by 10. If you have that lead, if you have the luxury, which, folks, it's a great long shot, but if you do, yes, at that point, now you do want to start slowing the game down a little bit. At the same time, you don't want to shut it down to the point where you're so ultra-conservative that you don't score any more points and you allow Tua to come back and beat you.
Yeah.
But at some point, if you have the second half lead in this game, if you do, you're going to have to trust your defense to hold the fort. At some point, you're going to have to say, Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence, Bobby Okereke, Leonard Williams, guys, we got you the second half lead. There's 8 minutes left in the game, okay? Shut it down. Go shut it down. Enough is enough. Go ahead. We're putting the game in your hands now. Seal it. That's what you want. I don't necessarily expect that that's going to happen, but that's what you want.
And you're asking for, by far, their best performance of the season up to this point, if that does happen. But, once again, I go back to the Buffalo game, and I'm in no way comparing the Bills or the Giants. I'm just giving an example of the defense delivered, as we were talking about, but then also, the offense, and they did have some short fields, okay? It wasn't as if they were marching down the field 75 to 80 yards, but the offense said, oh, you're going to give us 25 yards where we have to score? We're going to take advantage of it because we know that the Dolphins in the blink of an eye can score. So that's why they kept, I wouldn't even say they were running up the score, but they said to themselves, if we have a chance to get 40 points, we're going to put 40 on the board. And we're going to give our defense some breathing room. And that's how you have to think when you go up against a team like Miami. There's never enough total points that you can showcase because Miami is the type of team that their explosion allows them to also get back into games. And that's why you cannot take your foot off the pedal on either facet of the team in a game like this. Let's head back to the phone lines. We check in with Scott in New Mexico joining us here on BBKL. What's happening, Scott? What do you got for us?
Hi, guys. How you doing today?
We're doing all right.
You both made really very good points, but football is not a finite game. All you have to do is point to the game last night between Washington and Chicago. And Chicago, had over 500 yards in offensive scrimmage. The league is just strange. No
Especially the first month of the season, that's for sure.
Right. But my things are a little different. I think the Giants have been punched in the mouth for 4 straight games. I think the psychological element of that happening to you at some point, you have to rebel and you have to say, hey, I'm not going to take this anymore. And it's up to the coaching staff and the players that are going to be on the field, whoever they are, to adopt that attitude and say, this is the way we're going to play. I may be the only Giant fan that think this is a winnable game. But I think the Giants have been pushed around for 4 games. They haven't scored a touchdown in the first half in any of them. And they're going to say enough is enough. I hope the coaches instill that in them and that they're going to play the best game they've played this season. They may still lose, but they have to have that attitude going in.
Well, Scott, I would argue, there was ample time for that attitude to be showcased in really the last 2 games, wasn't it?
Sure.
I mean, even the Seattle game, even if you want to put the San Francisco game aside, quick turnaround, they were away from home. You're back home Monday night. You're in your own backyard. I mean, there was more than enough opportunity to say enough is enough. We're not going to stand for this anymore.
Scott, attitude's only going to take you so far.
And that's my point.
I think they had the right attitude. I'm in that locker room every day. They had the right attitude. Now it's time for execution.
Right. Well, execution is one thing, Paul, but desire and effort is the other thing that comes into play. But I want to go over the practical ways that the Giants can defend against Miami. We obviously know they have team speed with the 2 outside receivers. Do you think in this particular game they may even use 4 safeties or 3 safeties to sort of mitigate the speed that Waddle and
Tyreek Hill, you're talking about.
Tyreek Hill
yeah.
have and play between the 20s? In other words, let them have the middle of the field, but then sort of hunker down and hold them to field goals as opposed to just letting them have a 75-yard touchdown. And is that one way they would do it? And on the offensive side, the question I would ask is have Daniel Jones run more than he has been? Because if the offensive line can't protect him and they can't run, he has to get out of the pocket as quickly as he possibly can because his internal clock is all screwed up at this point because he thinks he's going to get hit on almost every play. So from those 2 vantage points, what are the machinations? What do you think the Giants are going to sort of do to countermand the offensive line that's not holding up? And then on the other side of the equation, to counter the speed of Miami, and what kind of defense do you think they would do in regards to, as I said, one suggestion is having more safeties on the field, Belton as well as McKinney and the other guys to try to countermand the speed. And those are the 2 questions I have, and I'll be glad to take them off the air, guys. Thanks
and
again.
Appreciate the phone call. Thanks for giving us a ring here. As far as the defensive approach, let's start with that, Paul. It was interesting. When Wink Martindale spoke to the media the other day, one of the things he emphasized was the Dolphins have faced very few 3rd downs this season, right? Because they have so many explosive plays. No, and the reason why I think that that's relevant is because I do think, and I want to give you the numbers, they actually have faced 38 3rd downs. That is the fewest in the NFL.
Right.
They have converted 42% of them, which is not bad, but 38. The team that has faced the most 3rd downs, the Chicago Bears, in fairness, they played an additional game. So let me give you the next team, the Houston Texans, because they've also only played 4 games, 64 3rd downs. So the Texans have faced nearly double the amount of 3rd downs from the Miami Dolphins. So if you're Wink, I do think you'd like to try to get the volume of 3rd downs up for Miami. I think that is absolutely the philosophy. You protect yourself, of course, against the explosive play. But here's the thing. Even if you're getting them in 3rd downs, Paul, my response to that would be, well, what 3rd downs are you putting them in? If you're putting him in 3rd and 4s and 3rd and 2s, I would say Mike McDaniel likes his chances, right? Because they love to run the football. So it's
and they're averaging 6 yards a carry.
100%. So the point is, all right, you want to keep everybody in front of you. You want to try to win by 1,000 cuts, that type of philosophy. If you give them 4 or 5 yards between their first 2 downs, you're still giving them manageable 3rd down. So my response would be, that's half the battle. Down and distance really may even matter more.
Well, the 42% on third down conversions by Miami's offense ranks 12th in the league.
That's
Nothing
pretty good.
shabby about that. That's okay.
That's respectable.
That's okay.
Yeah.
But, yeah, as Wink said yesterday, and his comment was actually this, they stress your defense on all 3 downs, is what he said.
But he emphasized the fact that they barely get to third down.
They don't have to a lot of
Exactly.
times.
Yeah.
So, I think it's an interesting point about putting the extra speed on the field. I would not put it past the Giants to put an extra defensive back out there. Is it going to be Belton? Is it going to be Flott? Is it going to be Holmes? None of those guys have 4.2 speed. So what they're going to have to weigh is what is the speed factor? How heavy is the speed factor against the physicality that they're going to want to lay on the Dolphins' offensive players? Are they better off? Maybe Isaiah Simmons has really good speed.
Yeah.
And he's a big man. He's got some
Length.
bulk to him.
Yeah.
And length. Maybe Isaiah Simmons, maybe this is the game where they actually unveil his complete package, because we've been told they're still working him in. Maybe this is the game where Isaiah Simmons gets a full game, plays all 3 downs, full game. And with his speed and with his ability to whack people, he can give you some of both.
I like that philosophy. I would say I'd prioritize length and tackling over speed in a game like this from a defensive standpoint. Because if the goal is, Paul...
I don't mind having both.
Well, of course, in an ideal world. But what I'm saying is if we're talking about a philosophy of the priority is keep everybody in front of you, try to get them into some third and longs. The way you do that is you have the length and the physicality to combine to tackle. To me, tackling is critical in this game. It's not a track meet. You're not worried about can the defensive back keep up with Tyreek Hill. Yes, that goes without saying. You need guys to stay in traffic. But if you have the opportunity to prevent the explosive plays and the Dolphins play into your hands, you now need to answer the call with the tackling. So I'd go with a Simmons. Cordell Flott has length too. That's another guy who I would take into consideration more so than any of these other guys who you think could just maybe run with them up the sideline.
The thing about it is, if you whack guys hard enough, legally, but make them feel it, like what Buffalo did. Buffalo made every Dolphin on that offense feel the pain last week. That in itself is a deterrent. That gives some of those speed burners that extra second to think about something before they make their move and explode out of the gates. That's why, when Wink was asked about the Bills, he's like, well, first thing, they got physical. That's part of it. It's all part of it. Every little thing that you could do to take away their speed advantage, no matter how minuscule it is, everything you do to chip away at that is what you have to do.
As far as the offensive question about is this a game where you want to see Daniel Jones run, and we did see some of that against Seattle, but part of that was because he had no choice. I don't think that's going to win you the game, though. I don't think Daniel being a heavy runner in this game, because once again, Paul, it goes back to you and I talking about, this is a game you need explosive plays. You can't expect Daniel to set you up in manageable downs all day long and you go on 10-play, 80-yard drives. So, it's nice to have Daniel run. I think that's an important component, but that to me can't be the heavy lifter. It's the Wallers, the Jalen Hyatts, and the Wan'Dale Robinsons. Yeah. Those are the guys that need to produce plays. This is not a game where Daniel you want to see running 12, 13 times, even if he gets 70 to 75 yards. I don't think that's going to be enough to solidify a win.
Well, if he wants to run for a couple 50-yard dashes, I wouldn't mind.
Yeah.
Get some explosive plays
like
that
we saw
way.
against the Eagles you're talking about a few years back, as long as the turf doesn't trip him up. Yes.
Fangio, believe it or not, is playing 2 deep zone. And he's not traveling Xavier Howard, which is odd. Everybody expected that Howard was going to travel with the best receiver, and they expected this defense to be more aggressive. That's not what Fangio's doing with Miami. Through the first month of the season, he's playing 2 deep zone with shell coverage, and Howard is staying on one side, and they've had troubles with the other side.
Well, because they lost Jalen Ramsey.
Yeah, Ramsey's out with injury till later in the season.
Correct, yeah.
If that. And Kohu has been getting torched.
Yeah, Diggs feasted on him.
Diggs had 3 touchdown catches for well over 100 yards last week.
Yep.
Absolutely destroyed the Dolphins secondary, and Kohu was the guy who they had targeted because Howard was not traveling. So they knew, okay, He's going to be there. We know where he is. We're not going to deal with him. We're going to deal with the other guy. And it worked beautifully because Kohu just could not handle business.
Yeah, there were two things. I don't mean to interrupt you. It was Kohu, and then Brandon Jones just came back from injury, the safety. So this will be now an additional game back for him because he and Javon Holland, I would argue, one of the best safety tandems in the NFL. Unfortunately, guys have not been fully healthy. So do they experiment a little bit more with Jones now back for an additional game? Perhaps. But yeah, the loss of Ramsey set them back. Here's another guy that they're without, Nick Needham, who was hurt last season with the torn Achilles. He now is starting his clock to come off of PUP, but he's not going to play this week. So it's the fact that they're really down two of their top corners. That's what really set back this Dolphins secondary.
And as you're watching the game on television on Sunday, Xavier Howard would be playing the left cornerback spot for the Dolphins. Again, they're not traveling him. So it's whoever the receiver is on the Giants' right side of the offense that would be matched up against Howard.
So that is at least the answer to the last question with respect to the offense and defensive philosophy. Let's head back to the phone lines. We got Rocco in New York joining us here on BBKL. What's happening, Rocco?
What's going on, guys?
Doing all right.
Honestly,
what's on your mind?
Well, first, does Howard really have to travel with anyone on this team? I mean, I don't really think there's a receiver that's really putting fear in anyone's eyes here. You know, that's on that point. But as far as making plays, I think, Lance, you're right. Having Daniel Jones run is not going to make them, it's not going to make the outcome of this game really change. They need to make big plays. That starts up front. That starts with time. The problem is this offensive line is the problem. They've been a problem for a while. The injuries have added up. And honestly, for the last couple of years, I blame some of it on coaching because of the fact that there's been no consistency with the starting lineup. You can't say it now because you have injuries. But the rotation at guard, I mean, when will that end? When will we get a starting five, have some consistency, and give Daniel a shot? Because at the end of the day, I'm almost scared that Daniel's going to become, Carr's brother from many years ago.
David Carr with the Texans, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, he's going to be gun shy. I mean, we're destroying this guy mentally because of this. I mean, it's sad. And on another point, too, as far as Evan Neal, he's a young guy. I'm not going to sit here and criticize him on his play that hard. But I will say from the other day, Hugo, who called, brought up some very good points in regards to him. I mean, Paul didn't agree with him, obviously, but he brought up some fantastic points. And there's a lot to be said that Evan Neal didn't do anything in the combine, and that says a lot. And I really think that should be looked at a little bit more. I want to give the guy a shot, but listen, you can go back to that call, and that was a good assessment. Unfortunately, Paul didn't think so, but it was.
Well, the only part of the assessment that was any good is that Neal is not a guard. He's right about that, and I said he was right about that. Evan Neal should not play guard. He needs to work himself out at tackle and get it right at tackle. That's where he belongs. He's not going to be – I don't believe he's ever going to be a productive NFL guard.
I don't believe he's going to be a guard either.
So we all agree. Kumbaya, my man.
But Paul, I mean, it's not even a technique thing. It honestly is a speed thing. He's a little slow. I mean, I'm going to give him time. And I don't want to, argue with you or whatever. I'm just putting it out there, that's all. But I just think that it all starts up front, just like it starts up front with the defense.
Sure.
Even with Thibodeau. I mean, guys, Thibodeau got a sack last week, but I'll flat out tell you, the best edge rusher on this team, he's just got to stay healthy, is Azeez Ojulari.
Yeah.
And it's by a mile.
Yeah.
The only reason why Thibodeau got that sack is because Azeez forced the quarterback up into the pocket.
You're right. They worked in tandem. And, in fact, I mentioned that on the huddle if you want to listen to it. I talked about him and Thibodeau working in conjunction, and Ojulari went to the back of the pocket, Thibodeau went to the front, and the quarterback stepped up and Thibodeau squashed him. That's exactly the way they want that dynamic duo to work out. So you're right on that point, too.
And as far as, I'm hoping Azeez really stays healthy for the rest of the year. I love this guy. I think he can really be a dynamic edge rusher. And the one thing about him, on another point, is if you ever watch his tape, when he's getting after the quarterback, he is not a guy who wants to make it flashy. He is not looking for the big hit. He is looking at that ball, and he is looking to tap that ball out of the quarterback's hand. He is consistently doing that when he gets there. If you look at a lot of his old tape, a lot of his sacks, he is a heads-up player, smart player. I will say that. But this is all I really have to say, guys. I mean, I know it's going to, everyone talks about this, but it's up front. Yeah. And if that offensive line doesn't get corrected, and when everyone gets healthy, these coaches got to really pick the five. Because it's going to fall on them. Eventually, the fans, and they're going to be right to be angry with Dable and whoever, because you have to have a starting five. There shouldn't be a rotation.
Here's the problem. Here's the problem.
We'll let you go on that.
All right, well, just listen into the answer here. I happen to be one who favors playing guys more in the preseason. That's not the way most of this league goes. But if you've listened at all, I really favor playing more snaps in the preseason with your regulars. I specifically believe that that's important for the offensive line, more so than any other position on the roster. I happen to believe, that the offensive line, you got to pick those starting five, and they need to play some healthy preseason snaps together. That's what I personally believe. But I'm not head coach of any team in the NFL. I don't get to make that decision. So I agree with the caller. You do want to pick your five, and you want to get those guys ready, and you want to make them cohesive. This caller and I have a lot to agree upon. But here's what I will say on the other side of the coin. The Giants coaching staff professes that you want to keep interchanging guys because you never know who's going to get hurt and how many are going to get hurt, and you need to be prepared for that immediate change. Well, unfortunately, what has happened? A bunch of guys, starting with Andrew Thomas, have gotten hurt.
Yeah, Bredesen, John Michael Schmidt.
So the other side of the coin, and I don't think there's a right or wrong here. Again, I prefer to pick five and play them. But the other side of the coin, and you'll get a lot of people who believe this too, that the mix and match and getting guys prepared for the immediate change is a good thing. The Giants have had, in retrospect, they're glad that
they were
did
forced
that.
into it, sure.
Because injuries did force them into a mix and match situation. So as it turns out, they probably, in retrospect, lucked into making the right decision because they've had to make a bunch of emergency changes on the offensive line. Just imagine, had they not done some of the mixing and matching, how much worse this line would be right now if Bredesen hadn't played a bunch of snaps at center during training camp in the preseason.
And that can be achieved during practice.
If McFadden, McKeithen had not played a bunch of snaps at right guard during training camp. Imagine that. It would be even worse than it is now. So, you could go road A, you can go road B. They took road B. Maybe that was the best thing that could have happened this year. But I'm with the caller. I prefer road A.
Well, I think any team would prefer to have five guys that you can rely on for the entire season, but I have no problem. If most of your cross-training is going on during practices and training camp, there's no harm, no foul there. That's not a problem.
Yeah, but the bigger part of that is that during the preseason games, the starting five did not get very many snaps together.
Well, but when you think about it, Paul, to your point, though, it would have
to me that's not plan A, and that's where I go.
But the point is, even if your five starters played the bulk of the preseason, if we go down your hypothetical road, with a handful of them getting hurt, how beneficial truly would it have been?
You didn't listen. I just said that. In retrospect, because of the injuries, Plan B turned out to be the better fit for this team this year.
Sure, but I'm talking about Plan B.
Under usual circumstances, I will always take Plan A.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is Plan B can be achieved not necessarily by sacrificing continuity with your starters in games. It can be achieved in practice, which is what the Giants have done. They've used their training camp practices to cross-train players. So that's not a game setting. You're not screwing up your starting five.
But part of Plan A requires the starting five to get a bulk of preseason snaps.
Okay, no, I buy that.
That's part of Plan A.
No, and
they did not use Plan A.
But what I'm saying is that you can achieve cross training in practice.
I'm sure,
I don't care. In games, you play your starters.
Well, fine.
You could do both of those.
Okay, so a hybrid. You're saying Plan C.
Okay, no, but what I'm saying, like that's doable.
Fine.
And that's,
Fine.
I think, could prepare your team for having success.
You want to mix and match and call Plan C a hybrid? Fine.
Yeah. Well, I think to the caller's point, it's my interpretation of the last caller. I think what he was bringing up was more of in a game where you're rotating guards. Nobody's hurt, but you're rotating guards. That's when it starts to get fishy. I took the caller's point to emphasize that. Not the fact that if an injury comes up, you're forced to obviously make a change. It's more of, are you rotating guys, but you don't necessarily have to rotate guys?
Well,
We've seen some of that.
They did that last year. They didn't do it this year.
No, but we saw it last year is the point, where you had when
That's
Nick
not
Gates
relevant
came back.
any longer.
No, I understand that, but that's what I took as an example of where maybe you start eating into the fabric of your starting offensive line. So as long as you're not doing that, I don't think that's detrimental to chemistry.
I interpreted what he said as you pick your starting 5 in training camp or the preseason, and you play them and you get them ready. And that's the way I interpreted it.
Okay, well, we both had two different interpretations, but even if you have your starting 5, the bottom line is you still have to find a way to get those other guys reps because of what transpired with the Giants, where they wound up losing a lot of key offensive linemen. The worst case scenario would be you're literally throwing a guy into a position and you didn't have one rep, whether it's practice or the preseason, because that'll really come back to bite you with respect to that.
Agreed.
All right, let's head back to the phone lines. Andy is in Orlando, joining us here on BBKO. What's happening, Andy?
Hey, guys. How are you?
Doing all right.
Hi.
What's on your mind?
First-time caller, and I listen to you guys every day.
Well, appreciate you tuning in and giving us a ring here.
Of course. Hey, so the 2 points I want to make is, first of all, I agree with Rocco, and the offensive line really is a coach's philosophy. If you think back to when we had Snead, O'Hara, that offensive line, those guys work together every single day.
They also stayed healthy, by the way, Andy. That's something you got to emphasize. I mean, remember, they had the consecutive start streak, which was insane. So
it was like 4 years.
Yeah, we were not talking about the backups because they didn't allow those backups to get into the game. I mean, that's the bottom line.
Fortunately for those teams.
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. It worked out well. And, at the time, those first couple games, there was a learning curve, but they quickly did, and they had a lot of success. But I do agree that we do need consistency on the line, and that has to start with health, of course. But the other point I want to make, kind of difference from this year to last year, is the Giants' ability to deal with adversity. If you take the Dallas blocked field goal early on in the game, and then you look at the tush-push and the failure there, the biggest factor is last year we were able to deal with adversity. This year we can't deal with it, or we're not dealing with it. And what I don't understand is we have some of the same leaders on the team that push through that adversity, and it seems that that's a missing thing. We just when something goes wrong, they cannot rebound from it.
Don't have the misconception that they can't deal with adversity when last year they had Andrew Thomas at left tackle and they had their superstar running back for all but one game when he rested at the end of the year. You see, when you're missing those two pieces, it's real hard to deal with adversity. In fact, you just don't have a chance.
Well, I think
Paul,
last season, if I just could add something, Andy, I think last season they dealt with adversity better in the first half of the season than the second half of the season. Because remember, in the second half of the season, there was a stretch where from November 20th, as I bring up the schedule, to January 8th, they only wound up winning 2 games. So there was a stretch where they weren't dealing with adversity, I would argue. So the first half, if you want to make a comparison between early start to last season and this start, you can argue adversity was dealt with better because, I mean, remember, the Green Bay, Baltimore, and Jacksonville games all went down to the wire, and they also rallied in just about all of those games, and you had wins at the end of the day, whereas you're not seeing that at all happen this season.
I guess what I'm asking the caller is, how do you make pizza without cheese? And without Barkley and Andrew Thomas, basically you don't have cheese.
But, I'm not talking just the offensive line adversity, just in general.
You're talking about the team, the team overall.
They're driving down the field, and a blocked field goal puts them in a funk, and then they can't come back from it. I'd argue if they could have come back from that and dealt with that, it might have had a different outcome. But, I do have a lot of positivity because I do think they're going to pull out of this. Will they make it to the playoffs? I doubt it, but I want them to be competitive in games and win games versus what we're seeing. So I do think down the road, and it's a long season still, even though 4 games are behind us, I do think that we will come through this. And a lot of it has to be the health of Barkley and Andrew Thomas. Will they be able to get back? And now
No
Schmitz.
doubt. And Schmitz, too.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
No, a lot of key players, and I appreciate the phone call, Andy. I think that's important, but, once again, you see other teams in the NFL lose guys and still find a way to be competitive and win football games. And remember, they had Andrew Thomas and Barkley for the second half of last season, as I noted, and that was a rough patch. So I'm not disputing your point, Paul. You can't keep turning to an absence of a player or two to explain why games, forget wins or losses, non-competitiveness in terms of the product. And that has been a challenge at some point, at least in the last few seasons. And the other thing, to the caller's point, if you want to say, well, it'll turn the corner, well, will it turn the corner against the Dolphins and the Bills, or will it turn the corner against the Washington Commanders and the New York Jets? Meaning the caliber of the competition
It's always part of
needs
it.
to be taken into consideration as well.
Yeah. Hey, I just want to throw out condolences to the Bears, the Chicago Bears family, and the entire NFL. Dick Butkus passed away yesterday. I was only fortunate enough to see Butkus's last 2 or 3 years in the league. But to say that he was anything less than a critical piece of the fabric of the National Football League would be just ridiculous. Because, when you think about a middle linebacker, and there have been a handful of them who are truly the all-time greats in this league. Butkus, Huff, Singletary, Carson, Lambert. These guys are not just Hall of Famers, they're platinum Hall of Famers, okay? Butkus defined that city. He defined the decade of football that he played. And as an NFL guy, I was extremely saddened with his passing because Dick Butkus, that guy's the definition of football. He's the definition of defense. He's the definition of guts and toughness. And I just want to, on behalf of everyone in the Giants organization, I will send out those condolences because I know how much this family and the tradition of the NFL matters and feels about guys who built this league. Butkus is one of those guys.
Well, he's certainly synonymous with that Bears organization when you talk about the all-time greats and those big bruising defenses. I think it's amazing, just to add to what you said, that he really had 2 separate careers within one lifetime. Because you brought up his football playing days.
Hollywood.
No, well, but there's a whole other generation of individuals that don't know Dick Butkus.
He was a blast as an actor, too. I enjoyed it.
Movies, TV
fun.
series. Sure, Hang Time, which was on Saturday mornings on NBC. I'm not saying you watched that.
Go.
Something tells me you didn't. But no, he was in some movies in the 70s, too, as well. That's, to me, what's amazing. How you have this successful Hall of Fame career, and then all of a sudden you start a completely new career after that. And an entire new generation knows you because of your on-camera work as opposed to what you did on the football field. That's what's really impressive also about the life of Dick Butkus, forget necessarily the football player. And that is going to wrap up Friday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live. We appreciate everybody tuning in. It's part of the Giants platforms everywhere, as well as Giants.com/podcast. We'll be back up and running again on Monday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern as we recap Giants-Dolphins. Enjoy the game on Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern kickoff. For Paul Dottino, I'm Lance Medow. We'll speak to you on Monday, and have a good one right here on Giants.com.